The morality of piracy and emulation. Before I start, I want to make it clear that piracy is illegal, and this video isn't trying to tell you to break the law. Instead, this video is questioning the morality of piracy and whether or not piracy can be morally acceptable in some circumstances. Just because something is legal to do doesn't mean it is moral to do, and likewise, just because something is illegal to do doesn't mean that it is also morally wrong to do. For example, if I say that my uncle works for Nintendo, technically, I haven't done anything wrong legally, but when you look at it morally, I have told a lie, and that is wrong. Furthermore, the law is imperfect and is constantly changing. Having discussions about these kind of topics is important so that perhaps in the future the law can accurately reflect the morals that are argued. The goal of this video is to get you to think about it and come to your own conclusions. With that out of the way, let's get into it. The first situation where I think that piracy can be moral is in the case where someone legally owns a copy of a game but doesn't want to go through the hassle of dumping the game. So instead, they download the ROM file from online. As we have discussed previously, dumping a game isn't a simple task and can require time, money, and effort to do. Compare that to the task of simply finding and downloading the ROM from the internet, and it can be easy to see why the latter option is more appealing. The problem, though, is that even though practically all you're doing is skipping some steps, technically you are committing piracy when you do this. The reason is that the ROM you download technically isn't your ROM, but someone else's ROM, and you downloading it would be like having two copies of the same game. In practice, however, whether you download it or legally dump it, you are getting a ROM file from a game you own. In this example, I would argue that while this technically falls under piracy, in practice it is the same outcome as dumping the game yourself, and thus doesn't really do any extra harm to the original developers. The second situation where I think that piracy can be moral is in the case where someone downloads a ROM of a game where new copies of the game aren't being sold, and the console that the games are on are no longer being actively supported by the main company. In these situations, the only way to obtain games legally would be to purchase them from the used market. However, with the state of the used video game market today, many games are heavily overpriced, and going this route is becoming less and less feasible. Once a game is no longer being sold officially, whether I pay hundreds of dollars for a used copy or download the ROM from the internet, the game studio that developed the game and the console manufacturer aren't losing any money. In other words, whether I pirate or not, it makes no difference to them because there is no money to be lost or stolen. In this example, I would argue that piracy can be moral because it's not causing any harm to the original creators of the game, and because the game is no longer being officially sold. The third situation where I think that piracy can be moral ties in with the second situation, but takes it a step further. In this situation, we are talking about digital games that are no longer being sold due to the support on a console ending. In this case, there is no used market, so all legal avenues of getting the game no longer exist. Thus, the only way to be able to play these games, if you haven't purchased them and backed them up previously, is to pirate. There is literally no other option. And again, like I said previously, whether I decide to pirate the game and play it or just not play it shouldn't matter to the original creators since they are not losing money either way. In this example, I would argue that piracy can be moral because it's not causing any harm to the original creators of the game, and because the game isn't even being sold anymore and can't be accessed otherwise. So far, the three situations I have presented are pretty good arguments in my opinion. But whether or not this fourth situation is moral or not can depend on what you think is right to do. The fourth situation is using piracy as a way of retaliation or protest against a company's behavior or practice. This can be because the company's official product is inferior to the pirated product, the official product is overpriced, or the company simply has trashy practices. An example would be Nintendo, who has time and time again hurt its own community by copyright striking creators, shutting down tournaments, and countless other offenses. Of course, even if Nintendo was legally in the wrong in some of these cases, which sadly they are legally in the right in many of them, there is no way that the average Joe could afford to battle Nintendo in court, and so many people who are attacked have to back down whether they like it or not. And of course, the majority of these people are not acting in bad faith in order to bring harm to Nintendo, but in many cases they are helping Nintendo by building its fan base. Talking about Nintendo could be a whole video within itself, but the point is that since Nintendo can get away with these practices, many people see piracy as a way to retaliate or protest against Nintendo. At the very least, many people don't have sympathy for Nintendo getting pirated because of this. Whether or not you agree is up to you. Some people will say that two wrongs don't make a right, and others will say that it is a way of enacting justice since Nintendo isn't getting punished legally. Hopefully after this video you are able to take another look at piracy and realize that it isn't always black and white. In addition, I hope you can also see that it is possible to cause harm to others and do so legally, which can cause people to try and get justice by themselves. Even if you disagree with all the situations I have provided in this video, as long as you can see where I am coming from and understand my points, that is fine with me. Peace.